the rural communities in particular finding to be useful in their efforts to do local economic development, whether that was Main Street work or small business stuff or whatever it is. So, so why we care as an economic development organization about density is because it's really a part of thinking about how you're doing your downtown and village work. What was nice was the Ridwick people actually requested that the real speaker on this, Joe Minakazi, who really formulated a lot of the ideas I'm going to put across, come to speak, but he's too expensive. So you got me. So that's sorry about that, but I'm going to do my best. And he's very generous with his ideas. And I actually, when I was doing my my planning degree, he actually taught me about how he does his tax stuff. So I didn't completely make this up. A lot of his stuff is, what I really love about it is a lot of times when we talk about downtowns and villages, we talk about the qualitative stuff. We talk about, you know, how it looks and historic preservation and how it feels and all those things. But I think it's really also wonderful to talk about the math of it, why the math of small, vibrant places and density also makes sense. So it's not just good for you, it's like really good for you. So I'm not here to tell you what makes for a great town. So like, that's kind of up to you guys. But in general, these methodologies that we're going to talk about sort of translate across a lot of different decisions. So, all right, so on to the next thing. All right, so these are the two people. I really, really, really encourage you to go look at their actual work and watch their videos, watch their presentations. Joe Minakazi is a tax expert, and he pioneered these sort of different ways of looking at the tax productivity of density as a way to understand how effective it is to, for instance, use a little bit of infrastructure to do a lot of things. And Chuck Marone comes from a different background, which is civil engineering. And he really unpacks a lot of things, including some stuff I'm going to show you in a little bit about how the infrastructure that we were encouraged to build and that helped us build the communities we have is no longer really funded in the way it used to be. So for instance, the burden of caring and feeding for roads and water treatment plants and things like that has really shifted over time from more of a federal funded thing to local funding. And so we sort of ask ourselves, like, why is it so hard to make things pencil out? There has really been a change over time. And so that's something we have to sort of, why we have to think about tax yield is to try to figure out how to overcome that. So one of the most important concepts in tax yield thinking is like that you don't have infinite land, and zoning was often developed. It was developed in the last century, almost 100 years ago, but kind of the way zoning was sort of designed was with this idea of separating uses and almost like this assumption of a never-ending supply of land. And that may still feel kind of true out west and in places where there's still unincorporated areas, but in New England, it's not a great premise. And so sort of saying that you have to have like height maximums and parking requirements and things, it's fine, but we have to talk about what the cost of each of those things is. And one of the important costs is using land that we don't have a lot of and service land of which we have even less. So, thank you. So the idea of tax yield per acre is to take the revenue yield, the tax yield, and that's, there are different ways you could calculate that, but and you're gonna then normalize it across acreage. And so I'll show you an example of this, but the idea is to be able to say, to look at two different projects, we tend to look at things by parcel. So we can take a thing that has 30 acres and a big industrial building, and it is a $10 million property, and we say that it's worth a lot more than a little house that's on 1/10 of an acre, that's a $150,000 house. When you start to look at it in terms of what it's producing in terms of like per acre on land, and if land is a scarce thing, you start to look at it very differently. And so it's the same thing as if you were growing crops and you had to decide whether to grow, hay or tomatoes or something else on 1 acre of land. You would, if you could only grow one thing and you had 1 acre, you would choose something that's going to get you more per acre and market. And that's the same kind of concept. So, the first time I came across this thinking, it was in a little article by Joe Minakazi, and it was around Asheville, North Carolina. And so Asheville, North Carolina looked a lot like most of our post-industrial towns, 30 years ago, a lot of boarded up old department stores and old theaters and a lot of parking spots and not a lot of businesses. And people just didn't see it. They didn't see the value. They hadn't, that kind of revolution of understanding the beauty of main streets and the intrinsic kind of cultural value hadn't really come around yet. So he started to try to lay out for people like this question of what does it do? What does a building do? And so he took the Walmart in Asheville and he put it side by side with a former mixed use building that was at the time kind of inactive and they were working on. And he talks about how the big one, the Walmart consumes a lot of land. It produces a lot of property taxes, but when you do it on a per acre basis, it's not so much. And he also starts to point out other things it does, like, for instance, housing or jobs or things like that. I think this is a great way to try to talk about different activities in your town and just start to, when you're looking at thinking about whether it's some kind of, how do we get people to have elevators, right? Like, how do we overcome some of the barriers to redevelopment or fixing up buildings? And looking at buildings and really thinking about all the things that they do for your community. Because I think there's no way to compare apples and oranges easily, but when you are clear about wanting to have more businesses or more jobs or more housing units, if you just sort of get used to a little practice of being able to talk about what a building does, I think it makes it easier to start to figure out where to put kind of scarce resources. This is not to say any kind of, development is better or worse than another, but I do think we have a hard time talking about, mixed use development. And this for me just really started to make it easier to describe the value of these kinds of projects. So I took two properties that are Dunbar property. So I did the tax sale breaker. And so the one on the left is more suburban style. It's in Saxton'S River, and it's a little over 1 acre. And the one on the right is a neighborhood right here in Bellows Falls. It's Myrtle Street, and it's on 1/10 of an acre. And you see that the one on the left, it's a property that's worth more as a parcel, and it pays more taxes as a parcel, but it actually produces, about a little over $5,000 per acre. And this little gem on 1/10 of an acre produces $33,000 per acre, right? So again, neither one is better or worse when you're thinking about what properties do for your community. Yeah, that's great. So go to the next one. Thank you. Thank you. So this methodology, which is like the Minakazi methodology, this is just showing you like the spreadsheet that, thank you, I didn't do it, but the done posted for me. So that has a bunch of different properties and kind of showing them. And what I really kind of want to point out is that on the left, you see the assessed value, right? And so the bigger property has more value, more land. And it's, in a beautiful bucolic rural setting. And the thing on the far right is actually a garage, I believe, right? That's kind of the storage unit. But when you start to look at it per acre, you get a very different sense of how these properties perform. And so the bigger acreage one obviously has the lowest per acreage property, and actually the garage performs pretty well. So again, just a different way of looking at properties. And I'm going to show you in a second sort of why this starts to make sense when you're figuring out the return on investment from parcels in relation to your kind of carrying costs as a community. So go ahead. Thank you. But just want to say that one of the fun things is you can go on Vermont GIS website, VCGI, and they have mapped the entire state in this tax yield per acre thing. So you can go look at a live kind of thing. And so it's these kind of skyscrapers. I mean, obviously you don't have skyscrapers in Bellows Falls, but what it's really doing is they're showing sort of, a histogram, a live history, like kind of a 3D histogram of tax yield by acre. And so if you look at the entire state, like you can tell where towns are, where villages are, because that tax density, that yellow density pops right out for you. So it's a fun thing. I encourage you, if you want to walk, if you like maps and stuff, to go play on there. There's a lot of good maps on that website. So next. Okay, so this is one of my favorite little things that I've played with in my brain over the years. And so imagine that this grid, this 10 by 10 grid is like your neighborhood, right? Imagine there's 100 homes in your neighborhood. One of the things that we're trying to get our heads around is density is not just a thing about having more buildings or taller buildings, but it's also about population density, and those things interrelate,
right? So one way to think about this is to say, how can a neighborhood change so much without changing? So if you have a neighborhood of 100 homes, in 1965, if it's like my neighborhood, where it's kind of a family neighborhood, on average, there were about 4 residents in every household, probably more. 100 homes had 400 people in it. Today, given the population density, right, given the household size, a lot of older households, more single households, right? If you have about 2.5 people per household in 100 housing units, you only have 250 people. So with nothing changing in your neighborhood from the mid 1960s to today, you went from about 400 people to 250 people. That really makes it feel a lot less vibrant, right? And that begs this question of like, what happens? Like when my kids grow up and move out, like where do they go? There's no house in my neighborhood for them, right? I added another factor in here, which is that, you know, probably about 10% of the homes have been demolished or abandoned, which is typical. My neighborhood's like that. Probably a lot of Bellows Falls is like that. You've lost homes through attrition. And so you may have even fewer people. So I just think this is something to sort of really think about, because a lot of times when we talk with people about their communities, they're like, I don't want anything to change. And the point is like, it's been changing. It's been changing because our families have changed. Our households have changed. And if our housing doesn't adapt with it, we have the kind of change we don't necessarily want. We don't have enough people to shop at the coffee shop, to go to the coffee shop or shop at the local stores or populate local committees, things like that. Next. All right, so this is the thing that kind of brings together the Minakazi thinking about tax productivity and then the Chuck Marone thinking about infrastructure costs. What he's really illustrating is that if you have a parcel where you have, you know, a certain amount of parking and you have a structure, and this is a normal thing that you have in any town, there's also a cost for the infrastructure that serves any of our homes or businesses. And if you start to look at it purely in terms of the return on investment for the taxes for these pieces of land, you start to see that the carrying costs for the parking area, it doesn't really support the infrastructure for that, right? And so that's fine. You're probably covering your costs here because that building's giving you $52 per square foot and the road's costing you like 44 overall. But this kind of math is actually not built into any of our municipal finance stuff, right? I mean, I went looking when I was doing my planning degree, and I went looking for places that did their road costs like per, you know, linear foot or per meter. And I only found examples in Canada. I did not find places. I found research out of Michigan where they were starting to try to do that, but there wasn't really any like true models for making sure that the way that we calculate our tax revenue or assessments is directly tied in some way to some understanding of what our infrastructure costs us every single day. Again, that's not anything you're doing wrong. That is just not how it is done. But it really begs the question of like, why not? You know, like, why wouldn't we look at it this in a more kind of close way and say, when we have a piece of land, why wouldn't we be thinking more about how to get the most we can out of the infrastructure rather than generating a lot of new infrastructure liabilities that we don't necessarily know how to afford tax-wise. Next. And then this gets to something that I mentioned earlier, which is that over time, we've been, you know, zoning encouraged low density growth and cars, and, you know, fire departments would love us to have gigantic turning radiuses, and I totally understand. But the reality is that the public spending on the left is from the 1950s. The state and local governments have always been, you know, largely responsible for transportation and water infrastructure, but the gap has been growing over time, and that the burden on the right, this chart is really talking about is that most of the money we're spending is just on maintenance, and we're not even staying ahead, right? So that not only is there sort of a growing burden on local governments for infrastructure, but that we do not really, I mean, we don't have the money to do new things. We don't really pave our roads as often as we would like to, right? We don't fix our water treatment plant as often as we would like to. So this burden, this is the challenge, right? This is the local revenue challenge, is trying to stay ahead of or really get ahead of these things. Next. Sometimes it's important to state the obvious, so just bear with me. So, right, there are 4 ways you can reduce taxes in your community. You can totally stop inflation, or do some other things at the federal level that we don't have any control over. You can find new sources of revenue, like, you know, put up a
I don't know, a magical tower, cell tower or something, or you can stop spending. But often what towns find is that, that's a vicious cycle, right? You end up spending less and then the quality of your services go down and your property values might go down and then your taxes go down. So you kind of, it's not a winning thing. Or you can increase the value of your tax base. And so that's, that is kind of why I focus on this, because I think that especially in a lot of our communities, I live in Greenfield, Massachusetts, and, I've watched how investing in things that were hard to do has actually helped kind of buoy the value of our homes and made it so we can afford these things, right? So, and you can improve the value of your tax base through a variety of means, and some of it has nothing to do with people's individual properties. Some of it has to do with like your school's quality, right? Or it has to do with, finding ways it has to do with the market, right? Things we can't control. All right, next.
That's the last one.
That's it. Good, great. Okay. Well, it should have said thank you. I'm sorry. My last slide should have said thank you. All right, I'm gonna stop there and take questions, but feel free to also email me and you're gonna get a copy of this with the actual links to things that are much more detailed.
Yeah. I didn't quite follow you. You were talking about the 4 parking spaces.
Yeah.
The town doesn't have to maintain those parking spaces.
It's not about maintaining them, it's about the taxes that they yield, because the way that we do tax assessments, and it's so normal that it seems like it's a universal law, is we basically do the land has a value and then there's the built value.
Right.
And so if you have, a parcel, I'll give you an example. Like in my town, a motel was supposed to be built on a piece of land, right? And instead, a new car dealership came to town and they bought that piece of land and they have a bunch of cars on it. That company makes a lot of money selling really nice pickup trucks. But that piece of land is not going to pay any more taxes because it's filled with those valuable trucks, because it's still just a plain piece of land.
Okay.
All right. So if you put a building on it, if you put any building on it, if you put a shack on it, it would pay more taxes. But for them, it's a very valuable piece of land. It's holding $10 million worth of vehicles.
All right, I see what you
For
mean.
my town, all of the infrastructure around that piece of land, there's a stoplight, there's roads, there's actually fiber in front of that, there's water, sewer. None of that infrastructure is supported by the taxes. The amount of taxes that piece of land is paying right now, it doesn't do anything for us. And so that's really the question. It's not about getting rid of parking, but it's about kind of saying are we generating enough value from the properties that we have and from the infrastructure that we have to be able to, not just afford ourselves, but have nice things preferably. So.
Well, in that same vein, something I brought up when I was attending the big meetings before they adopted that name, I guess. I don't know. It is condominiums, and at the last meeting I attended, Camilla Robertson, who was our chair of our listers at that time, she spoke very, very forcefully about condominiums, and it's pretty obvious. So you talk about increasing your tax base rather than have a bunch of rentals, but to have owners. That would definitely increase your tax base.
I'm a yes and person. I think we need all of it. Interesting thing that I was completely shocked by in the last few years. I thought that as boomers aged out of their homes and said, I don't want to take care of this 5-bedroom thing. I want a place to live. I assumed that as an ownership culture, right? People who had equity, that boomers would want to buy condos. That is not what the market is showing. A lot of people are selling their homes and they're like, nope, I want to be a renter. So, yes, there's room, there needs to, and really what we're talking about is not, what you're talking about is an ownership model. But if you have a building that has 4 units in it and it's properly maintained and properly assessed, that shouldn't make it, whether they're condos or rental units, shouldn't make a difference, actually. It shouldn't.
Well,
If the quality of the building should make a difference.
it
But-
does according to the listers.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I don't know the listers rules in Vermont. When I've compared, things in Amherst, Massachusetts, which is where I've done more of the side-by-side comparison, you take a structure that has apartments versus condos, as long as they're comparable in quality, the built form
is in theory what dictates it. Now, having said that, I think that appraisals should be about the sort of the revenue of the building. And so, to that point, it should have more influence over it, right? So if you have a building that is generating a lot of rent, but is super appraised very low because of the quality of the building, that discrepancy is problematic. I don't know that Vermont supports evaluation based on the revenue very well. In Massachusetts, it's supported. So a lister or an assessor in Massachusetts would be able to do an appraisal that's more based on the revenue generated by that property. Vermont's, I think, trickier.
I think we have a big problem here.
Yeah, I don't know.
I know in Bellows Village, we have a lot of multi-units that are appraised lower than single-family dwellings right next to them.
Yeah.
Isn't that a problem with how we tax buildings, not a problem with whether we should have or shouldn't have multi-units?
Well, that's based on the assessment, right?
If we need housing,
No, I'm not saying we don't need
Yeah.
housing.
Yeah.
I'm saying I spent a lot of time with the listers when Camilla was chair of listers, trying to understand why things are assessed the way they are.
Right.
And I got no satisfactory answers.
yeah, I just wanted to clarify
Yeah.
that saying we have a problem with rental or a lot of rentals in the town, isn't that the problem is that we're not appraising them correctly,
Right.
not that we have too many. When you go get a loan for a multi-unit,
I
the
didn't say
bank
we
is
had too
using,
many.
the
Yeah.
bank is using the income to appraise the value of the building. But for property tax purposes, we don't use the income, and that's not something that.
And that's a state problem, I think, because I think we chased this up, and I was sort of, because I was pulling out the Massachusetts listers, assessor's guide, and it was like, there's a legal basis that just isn't as strong in Vermont. But I think, back to it's the yes and thing, like we need the kinds of housing units that people want, right? And the kinds of housing that people need at all levels of income, but also, we've had this big shift, and one of the slides I pulled out of this was just about the changes in our households, that we in this country have gone from in the 80s, a country that was very much predominantly like nuclear families, like families with children, to a country that has a lot of single households, like 2 or 3 times as many single person households as we did 30, 40 years ago. And that's by choice. Right. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Right. There's a lot of people who, like it that way. So what we don't have is enough different kinds of units, whether they are condos, whether they're rentals, for people who are doing it on one income or for one person. And so that's, we need all of it.
We're good?
Yep.
I want to thank you for all the information. You give us a lot of thought. And yes, we need to change it. If the state doesn't change it, gotta
We
get
gotta
to
work
the
on that.
legislature,
Yeah.
yeah, because I know myself, I don't think it's appropriate that equal square footage is not assessed or taxed the same way, whether it's residential, or single residential or
Right.
multifamily.
Right. And it's not fair to your whole community because
Right,
it creates
'cause we
an
don't-
inequality.
Not generating.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the bike ped project. Who's doing that?
I'm going to be speaking to that, but you should have had an update handed out. It was not in your first round of submissions on your packet.
Did I miss it?
Everybody at their table should have gotten that handout.
Ah, this one. Oh,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, the one you I saw earlier.
Yes.
Got it.
Okay, so I'm the select board representative to the, what is now called the Walk Bike Committee. We changed our name to be more understandable. And last time we gathered, we talked about the sidewalk painting. I'm going to go through some of our projects so you know what we're doing. By the way, we have 2 of our 5 members here, Stan Telstra, Marcia Stern, are members of that, of our committee. Marcia is the chair. So the sidewalk painting, we talked about that last time. I'm also working on bike racks. And one of the bike racks we're hoping to have in place is at the Saxton'S Market. Rockingham has offered a deal to Saxton'S River. We will pay for half of it if you pay for the other half. Amy, was that
We're
accepted?
debating it.
We're debating it?
There is a bike rack albeit not as good a one,
Mhm.
50 feet away.
All right,
So we did not move on that at our last meeting. It'll come up again at the next meeting.
thank you. Another bike rack we're contemplating, or we actually, it's going to happen, is at the town parking lot, just below Hetty Green near the TD Bank. And you can see a graphic of what we have planned there. And speak about people living in, without, if we don't have a parking place for every vehicle that we're in an apartment or whatever, a lot of people will be using bikes. In fact, ped bike infrastructure is a great way to make your community more attractive, more vibrant. Our committee is thinking about or planning to put one in the Hetty Green Park. That'll be installed in the spring. You can see roughly where it will be.
Rick, can I ask you, is that a village parking lot?
The village parking lot, not towns.
Sorry,
Have you spoken to the village trustees about it yet?
I thought it was town land.
It's not, it's village.
Okay, we will speak to you.
Appreciate it. We have a meeting coming up in 2 weeks. Maybe that will be it.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for appropriating your land. The library, we've working with them on, there's a little bike rack there now, which is taken up by the library bicycle
All right.
mobile library. So we spoke with Ian, the library director, about this. He's into it. But again, funding is a question mark. So that's before the library board right now. Another big project we're working on is the Bellows Falls Riverfront Trail Extension. And you can see the map here. And last weekend, in the midst of a mini blizzard, Bonnie and Peter Bergstrom and I hiked the trail from the water treatment plant out to Paper Mill Road.
Along with Randall.
Along with Randall and the prospective purchaser of
Right.
the Liberty Mill. We learned a lot of stuff about that, the trail alignment. We hope to make this trail, by the way, it would be an amazing thing if you can think of people walking with a beautiful view of the Connecticut River. If it's accessible, strollers, wheelchairs, etc. I think it would be a super addition to our town. And it also goes somewhere. There'd be a trailhead at Paper Mill Road, and there's a trailhead at the park downtown. So that's,
This would go through the historical society's park, and then around the sewer plant, and then up behind Liberty Mill, all the way to Paper Mill Road.
Have they completed that trail all the way out there to the Liberty Mill?
Uh,
Or are they still in another phase?
well, I mean, you can walk it.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, all they do is knock down the knotweed in the summertime.
Mhm.
You know,
right.
It's not level or anything, but yeah, you know, you can get through.
So the Historical Society got easements from the McAllisters, who are the current owners, to allow this trail to pass through that area.
They don't pay taxes.
Pardon me?
They don't pay
I
taxes, so
know.
it could be nice of them to be.
We, I point, yes, I
Point out.
pointed that out, the $23,000
Yeah.
sales.
We're on our list right here.
I
Yeah,
saw that. I saw that.
that's right.
So anyway, ideally, we will enable this, we'll have a path that is accessible that goes through there. One of the problems is there's not enough room for a switchback. Accessible trails can't have more than a 5% grade. And that's could be a deal more than 5%. So a switchback would be needed. As we were hiking out there, we realized that there's not enough breadth in the trail alignment to do a switchback.
Could you explain the switchback?
Oh, sorry. It's like-
Oh, okay,
Yeah, like when you go up and turn,
okay.
yeah,
Set up before you.
It goes gradually, yeah.
yeah, side to side.
But there isn't room there.
No width.
No, no.
It's a very steep, short but steep.
Steep
hill,
incline.
And
Yeah.
there's no width.
Yeah, Elijah pointed out that there's the sewer line runs through there too. And we have to maintain access to those manholes. So this is a dream of ours. We did find that accessible trails can be made with what are called resting areas. So you go up a short distance, up 30 feet, and then there's a resting area. and then there's another 30 feet. So that is a possibility for our moving this project forward. Gary is working on a V-Trans Transportation Alternatives Grant for this project. And Peter Bergstrom has been crucial in working on that application. So any questions about that project?
Being familiar with the recycling center, I know you guys been taking drugs spread on the knotweed. How's the success of that going?
Oh, is the Historical Society doing that?
No, it was
Was
the
that?
Trail Association.
Oh,
I thought Peter was mechanically removing it.
It's-
I don't know anything about that. I think Annette Spalding was collecting them
She comes down to the recycling center every so often and takes the rugs
and
out.
takes the roads, but I don't think she's putting them on the trail.
That's what I was told, that's what we were told. I was just wondering how they work.
Did Annette tell you that?
Those are rhizomes.
think
and
it's
The only way you're gonna eradicate the
Yeah,
rhizomes is to
she's
spray
putting
the
it,
hell out of it.
Yeah.
she's putting that
If you
stuff.
cover over here, they'll end up over there.
Oh, yeah, no,
I know.
I don't know where that came from. If Annette told you that, that's wrong.
I'm not sure if that told me that, just, that's what we were told the rest were going to put on those, on the
No.
trail.
No, they're
I just
putting,
asked,
yeah, but I can tell you where they're putting it, you know, around the fencing. Cause she's been clearing, the power company cut down a bunch of trees. And so to keep it, this won't come up in brambles and stuff, she's done a lot of clearing and she's putting these rows down and they chipped all the trees they cut down. There's mountains of chip down there. In the spring, she's gonna put the chip over the rows. But it's not for the trail.
try to keep weeds and keep it clear.
Yeah, just try and keep some of the brambles and weeds down and the poison ivy and stuff like that.
Thank you. The prospective purchaser has some concerns about the trail blocking access from his property down to the river. Prospective property. So we talked about how that would work. The current plan called for the trail to go right through what he hopes to be a parking lot. We realized that would be not good for the cars, not good for the people using the trail. So the trail moving over more toward the river makes sense. Gary, I don't know if you know about that. So anyway, we had a good conversation with this guy and stay tuned. Next, we're having Bonnie Anderson's doing a Rotary presentation about our work on December 8th. To the Rotary Club. And on January 11th, we're having a forum. You can see the rough agenda. We're having a forum about the sort of the future of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure in the town of Rockingham. And you can
Oh,
see-
so it's supposed to say 2023 on it?
2022 or 2023?
It says 2022.
It's coming,
Sorry, that was my
That's what I thought it was
mistake.
last year.
I thought it was
Or
too.
this year.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So yes, it's happening.
Okay.
It's going to happen at the library. And we've got speakers from different organizations. Once the bridge is rebuilt, the Villagespecial Bridge, that'll connect us to the New Hampshire Trail System, Chester Rail Trail, which goes all the way down to Ashburnham, Massachusetts. It's an amazing, that would be a remarkable connection for the town, to have bicyclists be able to go that far and then come to us. So that's all I have to say. Do any bike, rather walk bike people want to add anything? Okay, thank you.
I got a question.
Yeah.
I think the last time you said the sidewalk, that you're gonna paint,
Yeah,
that's gonna get held off till spring,
yes.
obviously now.
Too cold.
Did you just, my question was, did you determine a color?
Oh, the orange thing.
And what,
That was a good, no, it was,
well, what made me say that is, but I was in Roanoke, Virginia, about a month ago.
Yep.
And I saw they had a good example of exactly what you're gonna do out here.
Yep.
And theirs was like it was a greenish color, not really like a lime green, but it looked, I should have taken a picture of it. What I should have done, but it made me think of it.
yeah, so I guess we will make that decision in the spring, Scott.
Yeah.
So green is something we think was attractive.
I thought theirs looked pretty good. It was not too bright. It kind of blended in good, but you
Yeah.
could see it.
That's great.
But it's just a thought.
All
I
right.
know that you also showed the red there in the earlier pictures.
Yeah, the red
Yeah.
was on
Or
the
dark
was
red
under
or whatever it was.
consideration. So, that's it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Everybody else, be all set? Any more questions? Thank you. Rick. Tax sale is our next item, the update.
So it seems like this will be a perennial item on the board agenda, but we're hopeful to move this into better position. Unfortunately, it took a setback when we lost Ray. So we're now working with another firm and they are in the process of picking up the pieces, but this is at least an update for the board for the current accounts that are past due, the amounts, as well as you can still see that we have some accounts that are still in that VHFA sort of limbo that we talked about, where the state had basically foreclosed our opportunity to pursue tax sale until VHFA had determined some sort of resolution for these people that have applied. So we at the moment have 5 properties in sort of that limbo status. We have roughly 25 that are in, past due. There will be proceeding with the full process for tax sale. And then we still have a couple that were in a probate situation that we're still waiting for resolution that might now obviously take longer with issues that are happening at the firm. So
Scott, the auto properties out there. Is that, these are supposed to be residential, right? Not commercial? On the lower, on the bottom list, looking for, waiting for VHFA.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be residential.
Yeah,
I think that, well, not all of them are necessarily residential. So
oh, they actually provide help for commercial properties? That's interesting. Didn't know that.
we'll find out.
I guess we will.
I haven't seen them do anything yet, so I
Yeah.
don't have any idea. We ask them every month, where do we stand? Do we have some indication as to when the decision might be made? And we get vague, non-specific answers, so.
So does anyone have any other questions for Scott?
Any reason why that's highlighted in yellow? That's
I don't
what-
know. Is that new maybe? I don't know.
I think it's new.
I don't remember it from the last one.
Correct. This has been going on long enough that some have been added, some have been dropped, unfortunately.
Okay,
Well, the title of the program is the Vermont Homeowners Assistance Program.
yeah, that's why I wondered why a commercial property would be on there. I guess we'll hear about it.
Yep.
All right, next item on the agenda is fire equipment committee update. There are
Multiple pieces.
5 different items I have. Let's start with the equipment reimbursement policy discussion.
So
Excuse me.
the town has an existing policy that is fairly recent that provides for service reimbursement if there's a specific type of response. It can be billed and potentially you can get some cost recovery. This ordinance basically got copied from the same ordinance that's in Springfield. The one piece that we didn't copy that we probably should consider is we have no enforcement. So we send out these bills and they're lovely bills and people don't pay them. And because of the way our ordinance was written, there is no way for us to pursue any type of activity. So there are opportunities for us under Vermont state statutes, mostly Title 24, and there's a specific section for civil ordinance violations that we can then go and pursue collection of these properties through district court. So one of the recommendations that I'm going to make to both boards is that we modify the town article to include this additional enforcement provision, because we have quite a few of these that have been sitting. And it creates a lot of frustration from the finance staff because they keep sending invoices and get no response, and it just generates a lot of activity and no solution. So in order to sort of give us that next step, I think we're going to have to do something on the enforcement side. And then ultimately, again, this is a source of revenue. I think we probably have upwards of $4,000 or $5,000 worth of these various responses, illegal burns, various types of activities that the department responded to and have not been reimbursed. as well as a significant one recently on that fire that occurred at the brush fire. I think the total bill for that's over 28,000
Wow.
for the response for that. It was multiple departments over an extended period of time.
I heard somebody say that his house insurance, policy might cover some of that.
Well, that would be his hope.
Yeah. Yeah, pray for that.
So,
Do we notify the insurance company on these bills that we send out?
Typically, they go to the homeowner. No,
I would think it would be a good idea to notify the insurance company.
We're not gonna know who that is, would we? On their home.
That's why it goes to the owner.
right.
Then they can go back to the insurance.
Yeah, by the statute, it's specific to the owner of the property.
Yeah.
So when Walpole comes to help us, they bill us.
No, not necessarily that. That's a traditional mutual aid kind of situation. This is really very specific. So in this case, you know, they brought in an inspector. There was a decision made that he violated the terms of his burn permit. And because of that, it made it eligible for reimbursement. It happens for things like some of our motor vehicle accidents or the, you know, property damages, you can get reimbursement as well. And plus the response from the departments. There's others of these where they've used foam, for example, things that, you know, the department has to purchase, you know, supplies, what have you.
Susan?
Yeah, there's also problems with renters who have caused the problem. We have this problem in our neighborhood.
Mhm.
And the homeowner is not paying the bill because the renter's the one who set the fire illegally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the ordinance could be, I don't know how you get around that with the ordinance.
The insurance goes to the owner. It's the owner's problem. If the renter screws up, it's the owner's problem.
Yeah, but the homeowner's refusing to pay.
No, but it's not, you know, it's good, it's an excuse, but it's not a legal excuse.
And I guess the only way that you'll ever be able to get that relief if you go and adopt this civil ordinance violation enforcement provision, you'll at least be able to then go and get court action on those. So you might have some opportunity for that.
If it's enough money, I guess it's worth doing that next step.
Yeah,
So
otherwise you
this
just have
doesn't-
these bills sitting in a folder, never getting.
Never getting paid.
Right.
So this is gonna come back to the select board with the addition of enforcement,
Yes,
and this is gonna come back, and we'll come to the trustees in whole, because we don't have. it.
correct.
This isn't equipment reimbursement. This is,
There
It
is,
says equipment reimbursement.
yeah, there is.
That's what it's intended for, like use of phone,
Well-
things like that. Peter, go ahead.
I did a little research because I save a lot of paperwork from minutes. I went back to the minutes of 2019. Actually, this was adopted twice. At our September 27th meeting, we adopted a policy, which is what you see in front of us.
Mhm.
But in those minutes, there was an argument made by Dennis Jeffrey of Rockingham that all of the money that was going to be recouped would go into the
Oh.
equipment fund.
There's that too.
And so I think it was Sue made this comment that, well, why don't we split it so that the labor of the department that has gone to that incident gets paid for the labor and the material, the equipment gets put into the equipment fund to, as Scott said, take care of replacements and repairs and things like that. So then the next meeting in October, we voted on the whole thing again with that correction in it. But one suggestion I would make is that we would take, and there is a schedule of reimbursement fees that nobody knows about. I think Scott, Wade brought it at the last fire committee meeting. I haven't been able to find my copy anywhere and stuff, but if we have it, I think it may be a good idea to have it as an appendix to this
I
policy.
would agree with you, because I wrote that down.
And then everybody would know, and then that would be, it could be amended separately from the policy if the prices were to increase somewhere along the line. So you just update the appendix versus the whole policy.
That's a
So,
good idea.
Thank you, that, Peter.
So I have a quick question. So under this current one, what, I guess what the manager said, I just want to clarify. it. So under the section Article 4,
Which is
enforcement. So what you're saying is what's there isn't doesn't fully capture what we need it to say.
No, because you don't have you have to go back to the state statutes and collect it under that very specific VSA
Statute, yeah.
24.
Which we don't have in here.
Correct.
Right, but it, well, it says provided by law. I think it's too vague,
Yes.
so it needs to be cleaned up, basically.
Right.
Right.
Especially if we have to take, if the town has to take.
If you want to go to court, they're going to want that.
Okay, any further on this reimbursement policy?
So you're gonna write that up the way you want it, or what?
Well, we'll modify it. It'll have to go back to, the trustees have said they would be interested in
In doing
looking at adopting a policy, and the board, the select board would also have to adopt a modified policy.
Probably attorney review, I imagine.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Same
Does
attorney who
Saxon
wrote the
River
one
have
for
one,
Springfield.
No, I think it seems to me we've used the equipment list, but I'm not sure how we got hold of that, maybe through Art Smith.
Oh,
But this is the first time I've seen this language. So it may be just that I'm too new to have asked those questions.
is there a policy and, like, I mean, you see all the policies, you must have by now.
But I should go back and review.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that involved.
Nothing.
You might want to look at it. It gives you,
We should certainly look through.
give you some protection.
Item B there is grants update.
Yeah, so USDA has had some turnover, and as part of that turnover, we've had grants that have been sitting, some of them for 2+ years. And we finally have a new grants person who's coming to see Gary, and I think the fire chief and myself and some other folks tomorrow. One of our grants that has been pending for that long is this communications grant, which is we've been told that they're going to come to hopefully finalize that and award that, which would be wonderful. It's some needed updates for communications for the department, as well as some infrastructure updates that will help us with our radio communications and computers. So the prices might be a little bit modified. That's one of the things we have to talk about, working on. These are 2021 prices, and as everybody knows, prices haven't come down. And then it'll still have to come back for approval back to the select board, because there is a local match requirement.
Let me see that. You have a motion here on the bottom of it, but is it 5,000 per municipality? What are you looking for?
Right now, I'm not looking for anything because we don't have the commitment from USDA. Until we get
Okay,
the
so
grant.
you don't want us to make the motion this time,
Not tonight,
not tonight.
but at some point when we come back, I will have an updated. Just want to give you a heads up on this since it's so long ago.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
I have a question. This came up at our fire equipment meeting, and noticed that Saxton'S River is not on here. And what I was told was that Gary Fox said that we're not eligible for grants.
Well, not grants in general, but the USDA rural development is based on percentage of low income population, low LMI, they call it. And so, and they have a percentage, they have a breakout grid. So for instance, Bellows Falls is eligible to get 75% of a project funded with this. Town of Rockingham is eligible to get 50% of the project funded. Saxton'S River is not eligible to get funds. It's income based. Community facilities grants.
Maybe we gotta get more so low income people in the Saxton River map.
Some housing.
Build some condos, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Well, is this something that,
Ellen Clark pointed that out at the last meeting. I had missed it initially and applied for Saxton'S River, and Ellen caught that.
so is there any room in the town of Rockingham, since Saxton'S River is in the town of Rockingham, to do?
Right, I think that's what John and I had worked out, was just applying for radios as much as we could get in there, and I don't know,
I'm not looking to take away from anyone, just trying to.
Figure out what Saxon River Fire Department does.
Well. All right,
Yeah.
well, thank you for that.
All right, so any further questions on this particular part? We're waiting for more information back from the USDA. Next is the ambulance RFP.
So I didn't include the entire RFP in here so that it would have added more paper and more reading to your packets, but the reality of it is we've been looking at what our alternatives are since we've had Old Cross as a provider for extensive number of years. I think it's over 15 years now, might even be longer than that. And the last contract, we haven't been able to get a secured contract renewal. So with all of the attention being paid to ambulance services, you guys read the papers, so you see some of the same things. We wanted to make sure that we at least had some options to present in case we wanted to make changes in service providers. So we have an RFP that's out. The reality of it is there's only 2 realistic providers that can, at least from what we can tell, come and provide ambulance services to our area. And so they both have received copies and the feedback with their submissions next week, and we'll see what we get and we'll go from there. But it's just more of an informational report at this point in time, just to make sure that we at least have all of our bases covered. And like I said, there's been a lot of issues in the whole area. And so we just want to make sure that we have some options.
Scott, is this also applying for the fire?
There's nothing in the package.
No, I didn't put anything in it. That's the next item.
I know it's what we talked
That's
about
the
at
next
the fire committee meeting.
Right.
All right.
This is just an informational update for the board since stuff's already been in the news. Yes, Gary.
Gary.
Yeah, so sorry, I just wanted to clarify, not to go back at all, but it was 2 years ago when we did this grant, and I don't remember what the rules are, but with the USDA tomorrow, we'll ask them about that, but it may be that that it will be illegal for us to say, take some of the radios and give them to Saxton'S River if they're paid for with that federal money that's supposed to go to a low-income community. So I'm not really sure how that can work, but we'll ask those details.
Thank you. Okay, so the RFP is due next week, and at which point, depending on what happens, yes, go ahead, Jason.
Well, we saw
I know.
this at our trustee.
We
meeting
did.
The other night, and was surprised to see that our fire
Public safety building, yeah.
public safety building was offered up as part of the RFP. That the select board was kind enough to just
Volunteer.
offer that.
Yeah,
Without checking with the
Without
board of
sitting with us.
trustees. Because clearly, there's a cost associated with this, number one, and there's also the issue of the impact on the facilities that currently reside there. This would mean additional people in the building as well as equipment. And we have people in the building as well as equipment. So there's issues here, not the least of which are cost. And we were curious, the trustee board was curious what the select board's thinking was in regards to offering our facility in terms of income for the village, for that use of that building.
Well, I can maybe give you some background into this, because the way these contracts work, in order to try to attract another potential bidder, they would have to go out and secure a facility and then be able to then come and bid. Nobody's going to do that without some ability to have a contract. So the thought was, and we worked on this through the committee, was we put that in as an option. They may or may not be able to bid based on that information. And then if it is successful, then you come back and you negotiate some sort of agreement so the service can be provided. So I don't think there was any ill intent. I think it was just an option to try to at least attract some competition in a system that, quite frankly, is not really open to much competition. And the reality of it is, the service that you get is a direct relationship to that lack of competition, to be fair. And I've heard complaints, and I think the fire services have heard complaints. And so one of the thoughts was, let's see if we can try to attract competition into the marketplace and see if that improves that service for us all. So that was the intent.
So Jake's, what I was going to say is simply that there's points since the cart was before the horse and the RFP is already out. The conversation will be had once a bidder is selected, and then when we have to get involved, we will get involved.
And I think the other thing about the RFP was, if it was phrased in a way as a initial accommodation.
Right.
While the ambulance service found appropriate quarters, that would have been a little easier, but I mean, this is a kind of an open invitation, and I assume that you checked with our fire chief
Absolutely.
about the facility.
We can
So-
make a accommodation for a limited period, and if you look at the RFP term, it's only for 2 years. It was done on a limited basis for that particular reason. Because we would then, if we're gonna make a change, and then ultimately they want to use that, then longer term, they would have to secure a facility and expand accordingly.
Doesn't the ambulance service also service Bellows Falls?
Yes, but housing them has never been part of the equation. So that does make a difference
So you don't
on
own
the
that building.
impact of our
Well, I
village.
understand that part.
Yeah.
But it's,
Golden Cross is helping us now from Westminster,
right,
so, but
I-
we're
I
not
know
paying for
that.
that.
it just. I don't know. Cooperation would be nice, I guess.
We're not saying we won't cooperate, we're saying it has to have a full conversation, which we never had the opportunity for.
The local residents. Having a good ambulance service is a goal of all of us,
I hope so,
whether you're in
yeah.
Rockingham or Bellows Falls.
Right.
So clearly, there's merit to what has occurred here. But since you don't own, the selectmen don't own the building, they don't pay the cost of the building, it's just the residents of Bellows Falls that pay the cost of the building. There would have to be an accommodation made for the increased cost. So,
Okay, that's Peter. Peter,
Scott, the board may correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember us discussing this or seeing this. As first I seen this full proposal. I mean, we saw one that came from Crichton Court from Brattleboro, but our board hasn't acted on this. Has anybody?
Peter, that's the feasibility study, we haven't talked on that.
That's the
Sorry,
next,
yeah.
that's the next.
Yeah,
item.
it's our-
Part of this either. So just-
No, I know, but that's the next
So-
item on
so
the
the
agenda.
To say the select board was one to
Oh,
put it on here.
no, we're
is
talking
not
about your
right.
RFP for the ambulance service, that's all.
So-
So that's a separate,
But I
we'll come to
think
the feasibility study
As
next.
Scott said, any accommodation would be coming up in his budget season, so.
Mhm.
So
Do you have a
if
question?
any material.
Yeah, I'm just curious, and I see the cherry shapes here. Can we fit 2 ambulances in there? And,
Yeah,
and
tight.
then my other question is, I know the exhaust system for these vehicles costs a lot of money when we get it. Can you add to that? And do you have an idea of what cost is? No?
So that's for further discussion. It'll come up. Anything further on this particular item? Looking around, seeing none. We're heading on to the fire services and station feasibility study, which you're talking about.
So basically, we took a scope and went through some of the sections of the scope to see what might be relevant for a request for proposals for our specific area. And there's a lot of information in here in terms of what we're looking for. A lot of it really revolves around data that's going to have to be provided from the 3 departments, as well as there's a whole host of other service and performance kinds of analysis that we're looking for. And the point of it being is that that data should help with larger discussions and decisions that could come from this about we currently have 3 departments. We have 3 facilities. Saxon's River has a facility that's in a floodplain and that needs attention. The town facility has no room for expansion, and we just talked about some of the issues at our BF facility, which is also shared with our police. So there are a host of decisions that have to be made in this area, and all of them are going to relate to money. None of them are cheap. Every decision that you make about construction or location or the allocation of equipment is significant expenses to taxpayers. So the thought of this document was to at least give comprehensive review of data and some options for everyone to take a look at. And then the larger scale decisions, at least that can help frame those discussions that are going to have to take place as we go forward.
And this isn't, and this is not, this is still in process. I mean, you're gonna get expecting
This is
commentary from.
The idea is if there's any other potential items that are important in the actual scope, because that's the important piece of this. The rest of it, the first beginning phases are just basic language for the contract. But the attachment for the scope of service is really the key piece of this. And that's going to be what drives not only the quality of the product, but also the cost. So most of this, we just adapted from another project that we've done here in Vermont. But
Scott, would the consultant look at sharing of equipment and facilities among the 3 fire departments, or for example, like Saxton'S River and Rockingham decided to build a joint fire station? Is that the kind of idea that these guys would bring forth or investigate?
yeah, and they're going to do that based on what the service demands are, what our equipment mix is, what our manpower is, and then what other projections that they can make. Because again, they have to look at that workload, they have to look at what's our current utilization, and then they will make some recommendations. So
We should get some hard deliverables, which we'll be able to make.
yes,
Well, let me ask you, if I may, it's not the first time that we've done some studies, but and I know some of the recommendations, one of them that came back at one time was a townwide fire department. Is that going to be anything in the scope at all? Or?
well, the only thing that we try to do is give them a scale of the data that we wanted and the types of information that would be useful to boards that have to make decisions on equipment, manpower, and locations. That's really what this scope is trying to accomplish.
Most scenarios will matter because Saxon's River needs to be fire department. And how does that work with the entire mix with what their recommendations would be? Could include something like you just said. Amy.
I think Wade had his hand up first.
Oh, sorry,
Go
Wade.
ahead. I'll wait.
I am concerned that some of these phrases have a very general meaning, and I would like to see rather specific meetings assigned. So for example, I see the consultant will review the fire department staffing levels, personnel management, and human resource systems. And I'm interested in knowing the age of the firefighters.
Demographics.
Well, very specific information. I don't want to know personal information. I don't want people identified. But I think knowing I hesitate to use the word quality, but that's what I'm thinking. The
Composition of the department matters.
Right, but I mean specifically, age and condition.
Not just the equipment. That's what she's saying.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Well, they're gonna look at staffing. I don't know if they're gonna break it out by age. I'm not sure.
You're gonna have a meet individually with these people and sign them up?
Well, I mean, there are fire departments that require physicals.
Well,
We don't,
well, that's up to you.
I think, well, I'm talking, we as in
Well, I think
Rockingham.
it.
Is there a
personnel
requirement for physicals in any of the
Well,
fire departments?
The issue that you get into there, Amy, and this is one that we've touched on in the fire equipment committee, and we really have just started talking about it, is when you do fitness testing for people that actually wear respirators, have to go inside of inside of a building to fight a fire. That's one level of fitness that is required. versus somebody who might not be an interior firefighter, who might have other jobs and responsibilities. And that is a different level of fitness, so it gets a little bit complicated to be able to really give you a direct answer on that.
Well, I understand that
And then
it's
there's cost,
complicated.
because to do those, they require
Yep.
those annually.
Exactly.
And,
I
you
mean,
know,
I
we're
know New
struggling-
Hampshire fire departments do some annual testing, like running up and down a ladder and being able to handle the hose and so on and so forth, but that's New Hampshire. Or, I don't know about other Vermont departments, but I know you don't. Considered it many times.
Yeah, and I think the other issue is, are there specific training requirements for anyone who is a firefighter in this area?
There are a lot of training requirements, yes.
So
Not only
anybody
initial
who
training,
is-
but continuing training. That's why these guys have their meetings and they go through and do all sorts of documentation of that.
Okay,
But it's not reported out. Like I couldn't tell you today how many hours were done in each department, and they might know that, but I don't.
There's a huge time investment, there's a huge financial investment too.
Sure.
Rick, yeah.
Will the cost of this be shared among the three entities, Saxon's River, the cost of the study?
We have committed money. I know you've committed
we've
money.
committed
Our
$5,000.
board is gonna take it up on the 23rd, next meeting.
And the total ticket is approximately what?
20?
We figure between 20 and 30.
Okay.
It just depends on the scope. We think we've knocked the scope down a little bit, so it should be closer to the 20 than the 30.
Oh, yes, Jim.
Well, the one thing that's missing, and I know this could be controversial in Saxon's River, is, and it's not the income. I'm not thinking about the income. I'm thinking, when I look at the cost of this equipment that this town is buying for the three departments, providing service to Athens, it would seem to me that has to be part of this mix. If they want to continue to provide that service, I think we need the consultant to say, hey, this is what it's worth. This is what needs to, this is what it costs to provide that kind of service. I think it's just, I mean, we look at it individually now, in a sense. I mean, we look at what Bellows Falls pays, and the select board look at what all the Rockingham taxpayers pay, and Saxon River looks at what their taxpayers pay. But I look at this equipment cost, and it's flabbergasting, and it's only gonna go up. And I think that if there's 4 towns using this equipment, then there ought to be a sharing of the cost of the.
So
of
where would
this
you
equipment.
like comments to be sent? Because clearly Amy's got some and Jake's got some. And
Well, if you
maybe
can send
a few
it to
other
me,
people
I
do.
can consolidate those, and then the fire equipment is gonna take one more stab at this before
Okay.
we put it out on the street, so.
Is there a
anything you can
deadline
get
for
to me.
that?
I'd prefer to have it out before the first of the year, so if you
Okay.
could give me comments before the holidays, that would be great.
When is
We're gonna
the
try
fire
that.
committee meeting again?
We haven't scheduled another date yet.
January
We're waiting
1st,
for
I
this meeting.
He's-
We haven't
he's-
picked a date yet. so-
January 1st.
January
Yeah,
1st.
yeah, that's a good day.
At 12:01 a.m., you want to meet at? Yeah.
But you'd like once we review this comments on or before the new year,
I'd like to have them
By
by
the
the 15th
holiday.
of December.
by the what?
The 15th of December. We're going to try to have a meeting before Christmas.
All right.
Anything further on this study?
Yeah.
Anybody?
Actually, that was, that answered my question.
Oh,
That
good.
was exactly what I was gonna ask.
All right, so the last one under fire equipment committee updates is the equipment replacement schedule, and y'all have a copy of that in your packet.
Since you've seen, this has been passed around a few times, and I've changed some numbers on here, not to hide things from you, but just to give you some updates. So the primary thing that has changed substantially is this Rockingham Fire Department engine 1. And the discussion at the Fire Equipment Committee is, as opposed to the $650,000 replacement cost, can we do basically a major overhaul? So a new chassis, take equipment off of the old piece of equipment, the pumper, and then update it and make it viable.
So this is a replacement.
So
This is
the
repair money.
125,000 just shows you what it would cost roughly for the chassis. So that would be the first piece that would have to be ordered. And then Kevin's working with a firm that does these conversions. they're coming down to look at our equipment, is gives him a proposed, at least a baseline idea of what a price would be
Just the chassis.
for an update. So what you see in 2023 is just the potential for the chassis. And we really haven't extended the rest of the pricing because we won't know until after December 20th, Kevin, is it? No.
December 20th.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so I didn't put anything further in here because we just don't know. And I was afraid if I put a number in there, it would, bias everybody if it comes in, higher, then everybody's gonna be upset, so. It won't be cheaper, or it won't be less than what you're already spending on the chassis, we can guarantee you that, it's gonna be at least that, plus probably more.
So that would be in
So,
the town budget. I mean, calculating that. for your
well, the
budget
fire
next
equipment
year.
committee would have to make a recommendation,
Yeah.
it would have to go back for some sort of adoption, so that's why it's in the middle of the budget discussions for the town.
Yes,
Won't the consultant's report affect this replacement schedule? For example, if we were to share more equipment, you're talking $1 million for one ladder truck for a town of 5,200 people.
right.
It just seems extraordinary. And so if the consultant were to recommend that we somehow share equipment, would affect this proposed expenditure? Yes.
Not for this, because I don't think, no matter what happens, you're gonna need this equipment with Rockingham, just because of the nature of the way we're spread out now. So they need a primary front line. And the second, if you look at the age of the second piece of equipment, their backup, you're gonna have to do something.
Now, does Saxon's ever need a similar piece of equipment? And is there one?
What?
Yeah.
I think that's Rick's question is, well,
There's several.
long range, will their recommendation reflect any potential changes for this?
Right.
Exactly.
My thought would be that would be something they're gonna look at.
Definitely. Because the 2025 to 2030, those numbers are not up to date.
Okay.
And quite frankly, are probably, you could double that.
Well, I mean, if you had to budget for that, you could put it as a separate article, and if it winds up being not needed after the study, right?
Mhm.
Then you could bring that up at the town meeting, and it might be a non-votable item at that point. Right? That's a possibility.
Yeah.
But if you want to do it that way.
I mean, if you look at the debt schedule, we're still paying off some equipment. And the goal here was to not take on additional debt at the moment, just because, well, interest rates aren't very favorable. Plus, I think we're all trying to go on a little bit of a debt diet if we can.
Yeah.
So it's necessitating taking a harder look at some of these numbers, and they're impactful. They're large numbers.
Yes.
Have the two trucks in Saxon's ever been reviewed yet?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
No.
Pretty sure.
So what's the holdup with that?
It's a matter of getting down there and meeting with somebody.
Yeah.
They're also two of the newer trucks that were purchased by the town. Two of the three that are out there.
One's a 2007.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm just, with all this talk about Saxon River and getting rid of all the trucks and fire station and whatnot, just wondering why those aren't, on that.
Let me ask, somebody's no doubt gonna ask, but for 2024 on the Bellows truck, engine one, is that beyond where it can be rechassied or?
No, that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about that
We
one,
haven't considered it yet.
but
Not imminent.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I have one
Yeah, go ahead, Wayne.
comment. Town of Rockingham Select Board. Regardless what happens without any of this, we have the equipment fund. So just again, a reminder that annually there should be money being put into that equipment fund. Whether it's 50,000 a year, 100,000, 75,000, whatever, because I think currently there's nothing going in. And what,
Well, except for the debt that's being used to pay for the previous costs. So we're still paying debt from previous acquisition. So that is being funded up to 24. Then I think all the debt drops off. So really the question would be longer term, and this is a decision that collectively the boards have to decide.
Yeah.
You create a sinking fund like that and you know, put a number in at some point, which will fund pieces of equipment, and how many pieces of equipment hopefully comes out of the study that you
Right.
did. Or do you, decide to bond and pay for it as, in that way as you go? And all those decisions impact tax rates, affordability, viability, all those things.
There goes your debt back.
right, but on this,
Yeah, I know.
on this equipment list, whether we end up with 6 pieces, 6 vehicles or 12. It's always gonna be a cost, hopefully be smaller than larger, but
Yes,
if there was money being set aside annually, like many towns do, not all, but many do, because they know that sooner or later, they gotta replace a fire truck or fix one or whatever, then it makes sense to put X amount of dollars away each year.
I agree.
The goal was to put 50 grand a year in that equipment fund for that.
Well, how much is in that fund right now? 0?
No, there's some, because we used it for that ESO, the new software that was. paid
Oh,
for
that's
the
right, yeah,
equipment fund.
yeah.
But it's under 100,000, I believe, at the moment. So
With these prices, 50,000 is a flash.
50,000 tires.
Slash, but you wanna make more money in your taxes. That's what it boils down to, that, Jake, you know.
Maybe I could frame that
Build the
discussion
bill,
in a little bit.
It's gonna be a rude awakening to some boards when they start looking at their budgets. I can tell
The
you that
board a
right
few
now.
years ago had made a decision that they were gonna update all the roads, right? So they got a pavement management study. They had built out a 10-year plan to redevelop and upgrade our roads. And they've been following it pretty religiously. But the one piece they didn't follow was at this point in time, they were supposed to be borrowing $1.5 million to help pay for the next
Next phase.
phases of road repair. And quite frankly, I think we're gonna talk about this at our next meeting, but I think most people agree that we're not in the mood to borrow. So we're gonna have to split some of these road repairs and those, have significant impacts as we go forward. We try to bring the roads up to speed.
Always comes down to money.
Well, but there's competing priorities for everything.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the point, right? We're all trying to be as responsible as we can to all those needs. And sometimes it means a balancing of interests. And it all comes down to taxes. We really get right down to it. And affordability.
Anything further? Anyone have any other questions or comments? All right, then we move on to the next item on the agenda is the VLCT Vermont Public Safety Services Municipal Action Paper. Excuse me.
This is sort of it's really, I think, more for all of our education, more than anything we can do specifically. And it's probably requiring us to talk to our state folks in more detail about trying to fix some of our problems. I know the town's been having conversations about options for different public safety services in the town. The village is struggling, trying to maintain our public safety staffing within the village. As you can see from this VLCT paper, we have structural deficits built into our training and recruitment of police officers. So that our problems are not going to go away. They're only going to continue. So there becomes a challenge to try to talk to our legislature about what can we do to try to help fix some of these problems that are impacting us directly here at the local level.
Yes.
I want to, most of the problem, a big chunk of this is state policy. I wonder if we could invite our legislators, Nader and when Leslie Goldman, our reps and our senators.
Yeah.
To sit down with us in a joint meeting in January, because a lot of this stuff, including the qualified immunity thing, which if they pull qualified immunity, if the legislature
I know.
pulls qualified immunity, Our recruitment job just got a lot harder.
harder. Well, you know, they're back in session, right, January, so might be tough. We have a joint board meeting coming up at the end of January. I think?
I haven't looked. to
Okay,
be real
well, just
honest with
Mondays are good for them, though.
Mondays.
I know, we don't typically
Tuesday,
meet
yeah.
on Mondays, but
And you guys meet on Monday. That's for sure. But, yes, it's definitely a good idea to see what their commitment is,
Yeah.
and where they think it's going.
For example, the residential requirement for the state police academy discourages a lot of people. So
It
things that we can't fix,
Yeah.
that they can fix affect us.
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry.
I'm also wondering if we could find out who in the legislature is assigned to these committees. I know, for example, Leslie Goldman,
Yeah.
her primary interest is in healthcare. So
Right,
she might not be the best person
right, she
to
might
talk
not
to,
be.
although
but you
she's
can-
our elected representative.
Right, but you can find that on the website. They tell you what committees these people are on. It's on the website.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the state website. And maybe we should, some of these, we should focus on them more and then see if any of them will be willing to, even Zoom us would be fine. In order to get the input and see where they're moving with it and maybe get some feedback from us. That's a good idea. Thanks.
I-
Yes.
I can't say I was surprised, but we deal with the Bellows Falls Police Department, and we know that the struggles that we're having, in terms of staffing and those types of things, cost, et cetera. But we also see what's happening at the state police level. And it's not pretty. The state police is shrinking. And that's a state of Vermont funded program. And I would have thought that the VLTC might have been more direct in their, maybe even a critique of what, we're talking about what the state's going to do here. Well, if what they're doing to the state police is any example of what they're going to do, it's not very positive. And I think, again, if the state police stop doing services, then either we do these services or they don't get done. And if you don't have manpower, the obvious answer is it's not going to get done. And so I think that, what I would like to see the legislature do first and foremost is to deal with the state police. And at least attempt to staff it in a means that's going to protect the people of Vermont. So anyway, I just thought that was something that should have been more developed in the report.
Yeah, James, you know that Peter invited the state police and the sheriff's department to our meeting 2 weeks ago. And in response to a lot of people in Bartonville in particular, but rural Rockingham people felt that there might not be any response to pretty serious stuff. So the commander of the Westminster Barracks came in and a representative from the sheriff's department. And it was a good conversation. I think the VSP is promising that they will be more responsive to rural Rockingham.
Take what I'll find out if it's making a difference.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. They were responsive. They seemed to show up.
Yeah.
Well, people have to call them.
Yeah.
People are hesitant to call.
Why don't they want to call?
Because they don't think they're gonna come. So, but they never get
They
called.
can't come and get a call.
I know.
I'll show up
That's
here.
just-
So here we are, so reminding people, please call when you have an emergency. If you want to see if there's a, you make a change, call VSB, call 911, basically. And see, and hopefully you can affect a change by calling. Don't sit there and wait until something bad happens, so just call.
The interesting part of that whole conversation with them was an eye opener for, I think, the residents up there. When they asked pointed questions, well, who do we call and what kind of response are we gonna get? And they said, well, if we have something available, we'll get there, but if we don't, we're not gonna, chase little incidents like speeding or something like that. And a lot of different options came up to, like, perhaps getting a plate number, or if you know who it is, give us a name, we'll chase it. Not you, this thing, but it's an eye opener, I think because we've been telling them the same thing, call these people, they're the ones that gotta deal with it, we can't deal with it. And they pretty much gave the same answer, so, you don't call, they don't haul, so. But anyway.
All right, anything further on the equipment replacement schedule? We really got far afield.
Yeah, no.
That's all right. Oh, no, we're on the VLCT, yeah.
Like,
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I
Whatever.
backtrack. All right, so if we figure out when we have our next joint meeting and see if we can, some of us could rouse up some of those policymakers up there that handle these items. We might get some, at least one or two of them might be good.
Yeah.
Next item is to approve the updated anti-discrimination policies we have before us. Do you have a main copy you want us to sign?
Yeah, I'll just give you this one to pass around. So since you guys approved the DEI for the proclamation, we went back through and just made some updates to our policies were aging out. There were some things in there that were missing, that they're not as relevant as they are today in terms of some of the types of problems that people are experiencing. So some of the language was updated to sort of more favorably reflect what's happening with some of the problems that people are experiencing. The basic policies are the same. It's more language updates at this point, and it's an update that's probably past due.
Has everyone had a chance to read these policies? Yeah. And are we ready to, we've made a motion to, we can do them all
I'll make
together.
a motion.
One motion to two separate.
On
votes.
behalf of the village,
Okay.
Bellows Falls, I recommend that we pass the harassment, anti-discrimination, and sexual harassment policy. Seconded.
Need a second? All right, any further discussion? Susan had her hand up, so go ahead.
Well, no, I just had a question
Yeah.
about the sexual harassment policy, but
Okay. Well,
I mean,
ask it.
Well, I mean, I was just wondering why we didn't make some of it more gender neutral.
Oh, more gender neutral?
Yeah, because it still uses she.
Yeah, that's
he
true.
As opposed to they.
Housekeeping.
They, but.
We could,
It's, I mean, every time that Ray had an opportunity to get in these, statute or whatever, or ordinances, would always say we should change it. Yeah, just to make it specifically the same across all the boards. Yeah. So does that mean we're not ready to sign them yet?
we can wait, we can do them in
We could
January.
do
if
this,
you'd like.
we could do ours in 2 weeks.
I think it's only that one
Yeah, we
policy.
could do them and then amend one if we need to.
I don't know.
I'd get it off.
You want to get it off the
Yeah.
table? What
Can
do
we
the rest of my
possibly
board
just
say
say
since it's
amended
the
language?
village?
It's only the one, I think.
Can't we just amend it at a later date, that one?
I suppose that's true, yes, so we could. So any further
Reaffirm it or
discussion on these
whatever.
three policies for the village? On the motion on the table?
Pardon?
Any further discussion for the village on the motion? Okay, then all those in favor of the, excuse me, of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Is there any nays? None. So the village will sign, and this is the copy Scott gave me. So you go ahead and do yours while
All
we
right, for the
sign.
select board, I take a motion to adopt the harassment policy, the anti-discrimination policy, and the sexual harassment policy. You want to make it?
Second.
Motion was made and seconded to adopt the harassment policy, anti-discrimination policy, and the sexual harassment policies, with the aforementioned corrections to, you want to do them before we sign, or would you rather?
Can't we do it that way? It's a simple change. It's just taking he, she, and that, putting in they.
Yeah.
And getting rid of male.
Where does it
female.
say that?
In the sexual harassment.
Sexual harassment.
I'm looking at it here, I don't see it.
That was why
Page
there are
2.
3 pages. There are 3 pages for signatures.
3.
Yeah, you have to find them, yeah.
An employee who believes that she or he has been the target of sexual harassment, who believes that she or he has been.
Oh,
instead
Yeah,
of
so
they.
just change that to
no,
they,
go with the she or he then.
just change it to they, just to make it.
Okay, all right.
Everyone have that in
Or, and
mind?
then I think you can eliminate male or female, it's any employee.
Yes,
Doesn't
they
matter
is
if they're male.
generic.
Everyone have the motion in mind?
Okay.
Everyone have the motion in mind?
Yes.
Yes. All those in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Okay, we'll get
And
these
it
back
will
to
be
you.
coming around.
Okay, so in the meantime, there is A on here, which is to discuss a DEI committee and idea. We've gone one step. We've all signed the letter of inclusion. DEI, and idea. And letter of inclusion has been done, but that's not all the work. That's just the beginning. And it does, it of course, it's the USDA requires that those are done now in order to make sure that we can get grants, which is an interesting piece. But in any case, there are other opportunities for us to do more, to start a committee that includes board members plus this citizens. There's lots of help. There's a new document I printed up copies. From Vermont Healthy Communities, Healthy Equity and Community Design Technical Assistance Pilot. So there are people to call, people to get advice from, perhaps attending some of our meetings initially. We would need to start one. I don't know how the boards feel about doing that. You want to wait till the beginning of 2023, but it would be the next step in diversity, equity, and inclusion in our community. And there's also a grant, some grant money available for materials and things like that that need to be done, or for speakers or whatever needs to happen. Scott has that. So what does the board think of that? What do the boards think of that idea of starting a equity committee? We've done, the letter is really only the first step. It is not, does not give us complete movement on this. To change some of our policies for the town and village is good. Bellows Falls, is good, but not the step that many other towns in our state are doing now. I don't know if we think we're not ready or we are ready. Yes, Amy.
So I know you've been close to this. What other steps are towns taking?
A lot of them have, prior to even prior to the letter of inclusion of the proclamation, is committees that were formed in communities like Bennington and places like that where they've had some significant issues. So they formed committees to, and the committees help get information from the state, inform their community, help them find better ways to hire, methods to include, to make more inclusion in their hiring processes and in their practices. Things that discussions having like the sun, can't think of the sun something community organization that can come in and give trainings and lessons. Yes, Abundant Sun. Abundant Sun, opportunities for departments to get trainings, for boards to get trainings, just to give us understandings. Everyone has biases of different kinds. We're not just talking about racial, but sexual and everything else. There are always types of biases. And in helping more discussions actually help us smooth out those biases and understand how the things that we say and the things that we do on a daily basis are impacting the people in our community. Whether we know it or not, we might be causing some harm. I was looking at the stuff we were signed today, and I looked at the materials that came from Ridgeway. Putting the world's old people living in our communities, reducing the number of people in per building, that word should actually go away because ageism, that's another bias. It should change to their level of income, whether they're retired, those kinds of things, should be the words that we actually use from a technical standpoint instead of saying they're old. And what is the old? Is it just anyone who's retired or anyone who's 65 and older? What is that? But that's a bias in a community where we want to bring in young people, yes, because we need replacement people, humans, but saying people in our community are old, yet the state of Vermont is old because there's so many old people, it doesn't mean they've outlived their usefulness. It just means they're maybe less productive or they changed their professions because they moved on to something different. So those are biases. Everyone could benefit from some bias training, from diversity training, to understand how you can include people in your community better than we already. We just learned about in the last, 6 to 10 months about doing more for our Indigenous community. They want to have a community cultural center.
They want to be more recognized. They're going to be part of our town plan. These are things that did anybody think about doing this stuff before? You see what I'm saying? We have an old community. It's been around for a long time. Not all of us are natives. No, native residents of Bellows Falls. I'm native, but I'm not native. of Bellows Falls. Looking at from that perspective, there are still lots of things we can do to include people in our community more. And that's why I'm asking if we would be interested in trying to consider starting a committee, building its numbers and getting trainings and doing more for it. Yes.
So what would a committee look like? I mean, are you talking about a townwide, village-wide, or like a village?
It'd be basically be townwide.
It'd be
You'd
one
have members
committee.
from, board members from 3 different municipalities. You'd have residents in our community to replace the residents, represent the Abnaki people. And I know that's not how they pronounce it these days, but that's the way I learned to pronounce it. And I can learn from that. So, and others in our community, different cultural backgrounds, in order to give us more diversity on a committee to help us
And
feel
these-
better about the additional, the diversity of our community. I
And
don't know
these
that a lot of them know that.
partners and supporters that are listed here would provide guidance
Yes.
and whatnot for the committee
Yes.
as to what their
Guidance,
tasks are, and
trainings, materials,
what they should be looking at,
Mhm.
trying to consider. And
right, and this, I send this to everybody, but this is one I got sent from the committee, my committee, beginning of the week. So there is help out there, and so we're not on our own, we're not reinventing the wheel. There are a lot of communities that have moved further, they have done committees, they have teams, they do cultural programming during the course of the year, try and help people get more involved in the diversity of our own community. Yes, Rick?
In terms of town employees and hiring, is Heather our current DEI coordinator, as it were?
We don't have such a, she's our human resources coordinator. We really have not targeted any specific DEI.
Not yet,
Okay.
no.
Initiatives.
It might be worth bringing her in to see if this is something that she
Absolutely, yeah,
can do, has time for.
Didn't she send us that email program that we were supposed to, the online program? That was about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Correct.
So just if there were one place in town hall where that stuff could land.
Especially if you're thinking about committees.
Yeah, I mean, not that I want to be,
Committees
I'm a lot of them, but,
usually require some support.
but truth, unless we have those conversations,
Right.
signing the document was one thing, but it doesn't open up the conversation about equity and diversity. So that might be the way to go, and if she could get, even get, some conversation with the committee, and the organization in Vermont that has that, they can give us some places to go, some direction, and then we can bring it back to the boards at a later time. I just wanted to open the conversation because we haven't done anything else except signing the letter of inclusion.
But you also, you talked about clubs, communities, what do you mean, can you highlight that? Paul?
What do you mean? I'm not talking about clubs.
Well, you mentioned something about community centers or club
Well,
centers. or something.
like for instance, the Abenaki Community Cultural Center. They wanted, I think, actually going to Dummerston. Is that where they're putting one, Gary? Is it Dummerston? Cultural Center, the Abenaki?
Well,
They wanted one here, but
the project we have here in Rockingham, we're looking at both the Waypoint Center and the TLR.
okay. So that was that's the cultural center. So that's just one thing, something that hasn't been done in this community for many decades, of recognizing the people that were here before, well, the white settlers, that sort of thing. There's lots of other things for us to explore, but we don't have it. We aren't having those conversations with diverse groups of people, getting their perspective. Youth, not youth, I don't say old, different cultures, backgrounds, sexes. There's just a rainbow of things that we can do to increase our conversations about this. It's just,
I hate to want to.
I know.
Uh,
I know you're gonna. Here goes.
But I look at this community and I look at the level of economic disadvantage in general, whether they're old, young, colored, whatever, any other kind of bucket that this ideal puts in there. I look at the struggle that we have in our schools with respect and education. We're not reaching, we've got generational underachievement in school. And, I know this is the hot rock, but I think when I look at this community and I look at the typical demographic rundown, okay? You're basically looking at, maybe 95, 96% white, and then maybe 0.5% this, or 1% this, or whatever. So I look at the issues that I just mentioned, economics, education, the way people treat people, as a far more important initiative, quite frankly, than this.
Okay,
So this is,
I just say.
but that is what this is. I mean,
This excludes economic.
and the school has an
Well-
equity committee. They have directors, they have people that we pay for with our tax dollars to do this type of thing in the school system to create a more equitable education for everyone. Because when people don't feel like they're not getting the best education that their tax dollars are paying for too. So we could look to the model of our school. The SU has one. Yes.
So I don't want to come across as negative because I am positive, but I think this is an area where we have to move really carefully. And I'm delighted to look around the community and see that this work is being done by a number of groups. So I think Jigs is right to bring up the schools. I think the work that we initiated with the signing of the letter was important. I think of conversations that I'm hearing at Greater Falls Connections. And I want to be careful going forward because I think sometimes municipal organizations are blunt and ineffective in matters where delicacy and real care is called for.
I do understand that. And I'm only bringing it up because we haven't.
Yeah.
It's like we signed the letter and then we stopped talking about it. That doesn't get it done. It doesn't really mean we changed anything. It means we talked about it.
But that committee can be started.
Anytime. I'm not saying rush into it.
It doesn't have to start here.
No,
Right.
and it doesn't, but this is a community conversation. It's on fact. It's going to be seen by more people in other communities too, beyond our own. That this conversation needs to open because there isn't a lot going on at this end of the state. This particular part of Wyndham County, but in many other places. I don't want to waste any more time. It's being 8 o'clock and after 2 hours of the meeting, people kind of drag. But I wanted to bring the conversation up because it might instill someone to want to do something in one particular board or out in the community or with the organizations that we already know have started some of this themselves. So that was it. I'm off my soapbox.
No, I agree. I think it's a good idea, but I think seeing what people are doing in the community now and whether maybe we just see if one of the board members could join something that's already going on. I don't know what's happening, so I think it's good that you raised it so we can figure out what
Right.
discussions are
And
happening.
there are a lot of organizations out there, and several of them are doing something. It's worth us starting to get to notice what they are. Thank you. All right, 7, last agenda item is review town hall roof project.
And normally this wouldn't be an item for joint board consideration, but I just wanted to bring it to both boards' attention because it will potentially be an area that we should talk about with either ARPA or other types of funds. We started with this project to upgrade the theatrical lighting in the Opera House, and as of course we got into that, we found out that we had a multitude of other problems. We know we have a problem with the membrane on the roof and leakage and problems that's occurring in the building. But in order to potentially repair that roof permanently, as well as provide enough structural support to support any kind of solar array or other type of energy efficient improvements to this building, we have to do some significant structural updates so that we can potentially carry that additional weight. So really, this is more for the board's information at this point. We don't have all of our costs back yet in terms of what this portion of that project might be. And at some point, we'll come back and have a more detailed conversation about how we might want to fund it. We've looked at lots of alternatives with this building approaching its 100th anniversary. We're going to be investing in the next couple of years, trying to get it up to speed for 2025. This is going to be one of those pieces of that process, but I wanted to at least let the boards know that, you know, it's like anything in an old building, when you start on what you think is a simple project, it morphed into a much larger, and more involved, and more expensive, by the way, project. So that's where we are. No specific asks, more for information, and at some point we might be back to ask about some costs and opportunities.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes.
Scott, have we looked at potentially going through a similar process, what we're doing on the meeting house right now, getting a historic structures report to look really comprehensively at the entire building and its structure, and really identifying any of these deficiencies, looking long term, so we don't, find out things like this that we didn't even really know about.
Well, we've been doing it piecemeal. Unfortunately, none of the projects ever got completed, right? We started on the windows and then that sort of stopped because we lost our contractor. So that has to go and get completed. There's a brick pointing project that we already know about. And then the roof project's been around and discussed with the boards for a few years. This is a new wrinkle to that, only from the standpoint of trying to decide if we want to do something for, efficiency or long-term energy sort of efficiency for this building. That's something that requires this additional support work. But we have not sat down and done an entire building structure sort of report, and maybe that's something we could look at doing. Because there's other pieces of the building that are starting to show where the stairs aren't looking great, the lobby in the front is not looking great. You can start to pick apart. We have ceiling work we have to do once we get the roof repaired to get all the plaster work done. So I can start that up fairly quickly without too much difficulty.
How expensive is it to get somebody to do that kind of study?
I believe the one on the meeting house is, what is that, like 50,000?
Close to 50,000.
Not all coming out of,
That's a little different because it's obviously a national.
It's
Right,
registered special credits.
It's not as big of complicated, is it?
This building has, right.
The one that was done a few years ago, that was Stevens and Associates, right? Was it just a focus on the roof?
Just replacing the
I think it was
membrane.
over $250,000. I was on the board with,
That was
Not
just
for
the
the study.
membrane.
not for the study, but the
Over the
estimate
cost, yeah,
to
at
do the
that
roof.
time, yeah, that's right.
And then there was some opinions about other ways to do the roof.
Yes, I know there were some other opinions, and I thought that person would be in there.
Grand, I think, at one point.
Right, yeah, it was almost $500,000.
Yeah, it was a lot,
Probably not.
and it was just
Yeah.
the roof.
Right, and the drainage needs to be.
Yep.
Fixed.
So we'll see, this will continue to come back.
Yes.
To review agenda items for our next meeting, which we don't know when that is, so
Written thought possibly January.
possibly January,
I
so
think it might be January. I think so, yeah.
so I'll just put January question mark. I'm sure there were plenty of items that'll be better, and maybe the tax sale and stuff.
Yeah, we might actually,
Might be right by then.
I'm confident we will have something real.
Review and approve orders, bills, and warrants. You guys want to do your?
Select board a motion to approve the orders, bills, and warrants.
Okay.
Second. Questions? Seeing none, all those in favor would say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Good one, ready to go.
I guess she is. Had to do it
There's a pretty
previously.
eager eye there.
Okay, motion for the village?
Motion to approve.
Okay, all right. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that's fine. Other business, Scott,
No, nothing.
I won't forget you. Rick. Elijah.
Yeah, is there an update on what's happening with 91? It's shut down and diverting traffic through town?
I got that
Oh, yeah.
from them this afternoon at 4:30.
Yeah.
And so I've not even had a chance to get a hold of anybody to find out how long this is for and why.
It's because of debris falling on 121 is what I've heard.
As a
And
surveyor,
121, was that closed
as
coming
a
in?
person with traffic, they're
No.
doing one lane at a time.
One lane.
Yeah.
Right, but they're getting closer
Not
to.
have to use the detour right now, as far as I know. That can change tomorrow. Who
No,
knows?
but this is from something that happened today. The
We
91
just, I
bridge
sent you a copy.
debris fell onto.
Department of
121.
Transportation sent us an update at 4:30 saying they were gonna close at
Okay, well,
exit
I-
6. So southbound traffic would have to come down Route 5 and then through Westminster back onto exit 5 to continue south.
When I came
Northbound.
into this meeting, it was still closed.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
was-
it's the 6th, yeah.
It was at 6 o'clock, it was still closed.
I will find out tomorrow. That literally came at 4:30 today.
No, I don't know about 121, but
The bridge
91.
crossing 121 had huge debris. There's holes in the road, so they
Wow.
had to shut it down. So it sounds like it's going to be for a longer duration than, unless they can fix it tonight,
Doubt it.
but it doesn't sound like it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that impacted 121 or will impact 121, because it's the bridge
Did you
crossing
drive
over.
into 121? We drove in,
did.
it was fine.
And December
BSD,
12th
I
is
gotta
what
tell my
Westminster
employees
says is when they're gonna shut.
Yeah, but this
it
is separate from that.
down. Exactly.
This is
That's
more on the
separate.
ramp,
Like
and
now.
yeah,
this is something. I
this
just-
literally came up this afternoon,
Yeah.
so I'll find out more and send something out there.
So currently, is the road closed down? Yes.
The ramp is
Currently,
well,
closed.
these last
91
6
is shut
o'clock, it
down
still
from exit
was.
6
Well,
back to
Well,
5
91 is
southbound.
closed down, but
I
one
don't know about 121.
Thank you.
Correct.
We came in that way and it was open, so.
But I can tell my employees if they.
Because
gotta
again,
find
I
another
don't
way
know.
around.
It is a road.
I know.
Okay, let's see. So we stopped with Susan. Thank you, Susan. Jake,
All set.
Peter, you had something.
For the select board only, at our last meeting, we approved the extension for the SVG grant on the TLR building, and we did not have the deed paper. It is in my hand currently, coming around. All we need to do is just sign it, and we'll get notarized, so pass it along, anybody can sign it, and it'll end up with Scott. That's all I have.
Okay, oh God, I don't remember your name. Matt. Yeah, there it is. Good thing we got those signs. Thank God. Otherwise, you're Eddie Bauer. Jeff, Amy. Wait.
I'm
Seven.
Yeah, I don't want to echo Scott, but I will. I think it's important what he's saying about what it equates to what it costs to live here in this community. And just hearing back and forth on public radio about what's going on with the Burlington School up there, and they're gonna build a new school, and I think it was 485 million. Try bonding that in this community, because I see, not to pick on you or single you out, but you do stand out a little bit here. I
What I
read briefly somewhere that, and heard that before you were talking, or they were talking about making improvements at the high school, they're gonna study to see if they have a similar situation to what occurred in Burlington.
Oh.
So,
Oh, yes.
yeah, so I mean,
Yes.
if you have to, in worst case scenario, if you want to build a whole new school or a union high school, and I think there is, when I looked it up quickly, was not just a high school, it was a junior high, et cetera, combined the building now, or proposed. But we could be looking at some substantial problems down the road here.
We'll see
to
how
keep in
much
mind.
ESSER money we still left.
Well, you had 20 million,
Yeah,
right?
we have.
What'd you
I don't know
spend it
what we
all on?
have now. But we'll find out.
Well, the
That's a
problem
drop in
in
the bucket.
Burlington High School was this stuff they found in the soil.
Contamination.
Yes,
Well, it wasn't just when the soil, it was to talk about asbestos.
in the building, yeah.
The building
Yeah.
itself.
So, yeah, so the one of the board members in the high school, I think appropriately said, we gotta make sure
Yes.
we check that box.
David Clark, I think.
Yeah.
That we need to have it studied
It's,
before we just go ahead and do improvements.
Right, and it was other than soil, it was air quality. It was
Water
asbestos,
quality,
yeah.
all that.
More than just
Yeah.
soil.
Yep.
So, and if we do have the same problem here, you know, you want a community that's affordable to live in, but also safe to live in. You gotta think, you know, I'm gonna echo Scott. It costs money. Now is not the time. Some stuff, and then some stuff is.
So what you can do, and what we can't. Okay, so my turn, all I want to say is, if you haven't had a chance to, over the rest of the week, while we still got some good weather, go ahead and take a look at the new lighting and all the current lighting in the village, because it's at least a source of joy. And many of those are free. Oh, yes, and I did do that last week too. Put your parking ban is in effect. You need to get your permit, $40. We are working on a process to possibly be able to notify people who are nice enough to give us their email addresses to get a notification before a night where plowing has occurred. You have to move to another lot. So that's being worked on. Yeah, getting off the street unless you'd like a ticket. You're in the way of the plows being able to move between the vehicles, and you'll get plowed in. That's it. Yeah, snow pickups pain. So, be aware of the winter weather and aware of your surroundings, including your cars. And that'll take care of that myself. I think that we need a motion to adjourn. No executive session is necessary. Second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor of adjourning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? No.
Recording